All right, folks, quick little intro. If you're watching this video and you're on the side of the road or you're in a parking lot and you can't get the car going, try this trick. So this starter is mounted back here. It's between the battery and your intake. So looking down between that point, you'll see the top of the starter. This is a solenoid. Get a bar, some kind of rod, and then whack it on it. Like whack. And if your starter is not working, if it's clicking but not starting, whack it and then try it, and it may get you home. It'll get you started, and then you'll get home. But watch the rest of this video for how to actually replace this starter. All right, here's a actual positioning of the starter. Like I was saying, if you're stuck on the side of the road and it won't start, run a rod down and tap on the starter right there. That's the solenoid for the starter. Just tap on it a few times and it might be enough to get you started. Just to get you home or to the auto parts store. So this video is going to be my process to replace the starter on a 2007 Lincoln MKZ. I believe this will work up until a 2010, maybe a little newer, maybe a 12, but this is the Ford 3.5 V6. So this is also the same engine on a Ford Fusion that has the 3.5 V6. So I think you can also, if you're looking for junkyard options, you can look at the 2007 to at least the 2010 Ford Fusion. So the starter is located right down here. It's pretty much under the intake. You got to remove the battery and the tray for the battery to get to the starter. So we're going to go ahead and start doing that process. All right, so to remove the terminals on the battery, you're going to need an 8mm socket. This is a small ratchet. This is a 1/4-inch ratchet. And then to get the bracket off down here, you can't really see it. There's a bracket on the side, and it's got a bolt on the top of it that's also an 8mm. So you'll need the 8mm for 3 points of the battery. So try to grab it with your hands or something to keep it together so it doesn't fall. So that's the bracket. So we're just going to set the bracket aside. I'll put it over there. So now the tire, or the battery can be lifted out. So now we have the battery tray right here. It has to come out as well. So on the battery tray, you've got 3 points. They're all 10 millimeter. So you're gonna have to take this one off. This one you can use a regular socket or a deep, but these two you're gonna need a deep socket. So a 10 millimeter deep. And you could use a deep for both, or all of them. And these two, I guess they're bolts, but they've got like a threaded extension on them. The way they designed this, acid has leaked down in here, so you may have one where it's all rusted out. Maybe you can get one out, but not both. Or you can get this out and this one, but not that one. If that's the case, you're gonna have to rip the once you take two of them out, you can rip the tray. That's gonna leave one in there, but you'll at least be able to get the tray out. So I'm going to switch to using my impact driver. This is called a 1/4 inch impact driver. I have it set, I'm going to set it to slow removal. Okay, so they're just a nut, I guess, on the shaft. So I'm gonna set that over here. And I'm probably gonna put some anti-seize on those to help keep them from rusting. Okay. All right. So there is a little plastic retainer here, which you can usually wiggle those off, or use a pair of needle nose. So you just wedge the needle nose up under them. Boom. There might be another one in here. Let's see. It feels like something's under it. There's one on the bottom for a hose. All right, so what I did was I put my fingers on the hose right here at this clamp, and I kept my palm on the tray, and I pushed down. I pushed down like that. Pop. It pops it out. Oh, there's another one. All right, I gotta drop the camera, but I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna hold and push down. So it's probably best to have this in position when you're pushing down on both of them. Feels like it's the same deal. All right, so what I had to do in that situation was I had to pull this up a little bit. I had to reach my hand down behind it, and I had to push down on the part that holds it. I ended up snapping that part. It looks like it's just a zip tie of sorts. Yeah, it's like a little zip tie. That's no big deal. Not a big deal. So there's the starter right there. This is the starter. So we're going to continue working on getting to it. What?
I found this.
You found that?
Yeah, it's for this.
Yeah, this is a 3/8 by 3 extension.
Yeah, it's for this.
This is a Craftsman USA, and you've got the snap-on. I think that's a 24-inch 3/8 extension. What do you think of that?
Yeah, but this is very big.
It's very long, yes. It's good for hard-to-reach places.
That's okay.
Nope, not in there. So here, let's set this down by the toolbox. Boom. All right, here.
What is that?
Those are called needle nose pliers.
I have those
You do.
They go open and shut and open and shut and...
Yep. So, all right, let's set them down here. I gotta keep working. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so from my perspective, I pulled the starters from the junkyard earlier today. I ended up taking this bracket off of the cars at the junkyard. There's a couple of bolts down here with a U-joint and extension. Shouldn't be a big deal to remove it. It wasn't when I pulled it. That should give us a little bit more space. There's also a plastic retainer, so we'll go ahead and pull up on that, turn it. There we go. We'll go ahead and move this there, move it out of the way. All right, so I'm going to get this bracket removed just to give us a little more space to work with in here. All right, so the bolts holding this bracket on are 10 millimeter as well, and I've got a little U-joint on there. It's going to help me to turn it. And then I'm going to have another extension bringing it out. All right, so I have the socket on there, I have the U-joint, and then I have about 12 inches of extension going to the ratchet. And so you can see that gives you enough room to ratchet it here. So we're gonna get that bracket off doing this. Now, when you're ratcheting, use your hand, your right hand, to hold the socket and the U-joint in place while you're ratcheting. It'll help keep it on the bolt. All right, we got the bracket out. Just 2 bolts. Set that up there. Now we have a lot more area to work with here for getting to the starter. This is actually not a bad place for a starter. I've seen locations that are much harder to get to. But there are 2 bolts. You know what? I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna go ahead and unbolt the starter first from the wiring. So your main 12-volt connection we're gonna remove, and then you have like a ground, or a maybe not a ground. This is the from your ignition to engage the solenoid from your ignition switch. All right, let me get what I need. All right, so the main power connection is a 13 millimeter, and the smaller connection for the solenoid power is a 10 millimeter. You could use a wrench for both. That would probably be the easiest way, but I'm trying to minimize the amount of tools that someone needs. So with using a U-joint, you can put it on here and take it off that way as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. All right, so we got the nut off. Well, take that, just kind of push it out of the way. Now we're going to take care of the solenoid connection. Just takes a little bit, and you can unthread it. Okay, I'll push that out of the way. All right, so now we're ready for the main bolts on the starter. There's 2. There's one right here, and then there's another one. You have to feel for it, but it's right back here. Same position, same angle. All right, so that's a 13mm bolt for the starter. I have the socket on the end with a U-joint with about a 12 inches of extension. So now I'm going to go ahead and loosen it, and then I'll feel it back here, and I'll put it on the bolt in the back, and we'll do the same thing in the back. All right, so once you break it loose with the ratchet, a little tip here, you can sit there and spin it, loosening it. That way you don't have to sit there and ratchet. And then, boom. You pull it out. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna put my hand back here and I'm gonna feel for the head of the bolt, and I'm gonna put the socket on the head and get it in position, and then I'll put my ratchet on there. All right, there we go. I'm on it. Now I'm gonna put the ratchet on there, I'll loosen it, and then I'll just sit there and spin it like I did before. All right, so I'm finding that it's a little hard to ratchet it. So I've got to have one hand down where the bolt is, holding the socket onto the bolt while I'm ratcheting. So that you might have that issue yourself. All right, so we got it loose. And you can actually just, you're gonna have to maybe hold it at the beginning, but once you get it going, you can kind of push down and spin it out. Okay, it's all loose now. So I'm gonna put my hand down here, I'm gonna grab the bolt after I spin it a few more times. Still, you can also take the socket out and just spin it with your hand. Boom. All right. So we're gonna just push these out of the way. Now the starter is free. Bring it out gently. Boom. So, a little something about why I'm pulling this starter. The symptom was that it would start when it's cold, but once the engine got warm, it would click and it just wouldn't start, which is I know it to be a more common problem on older starters from like back in the 70s and 80s. Then the other little tip that you could do if you're stranded and you can't fix the starter right away is feed some kind of rod down to where the starter is, and you could do it. You could tap on the solenoid, because the problem is the solenoid when that's happening, and you just tap on it, then it should get you started. It's not a permanent fix. It's going to get worse and worse. So that's a little tip to get you home if you're watching this video on the side of the road. I should probably put that in the beginning. If I can edit that into the beginning, I will. All right. All right, so to reinstall is just kind of the reverse of taking it apart. But I wanted to do an additional video for people who maybe are really short on money, and maybe they've got some time. In this starter situation where it would click but it wouldn't crank, it can be a situation where it's not getting power through this wire. It's not bringing power in from the battery going through to the starter itself. The solenoid comes together and bridges the power from your main battery connection to the starter, and it also pulls the gear out. The problem isn't that it's not pulling the gear out, it is. The problem is that the contacts inside are corroded and not allowing power to pass. So that pin in the middle, that pin transfers power. And this pin had a whole bunch of corrosion on it, and it was just, I had to chip it away. But I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to use a Dremel, and I'm going to clean that to where it's shiny. And then the other part is here. I didn't clean this yet, but you can still see there's some buildup on the center. I can feel it. And that buildup is preventing a solid power flow connection. So when I'm done with this is going to be clean, like brand new clean, and this pin inside is going to be brand new clean. And that is actually the problem with this starter. It's not the starter itself. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. It's an old school kind of mechanics thing. I'm not a mechanic, but I've talked to mechanics. I had crappy cars 30 years ago when I was in high school, so I talked to a lot of mechanics about stuff, and that's one of the things that they were telling me. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and clean it. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Also, I'm gonna use this is basically a Dremel. If you have a Dremel's fine. That would be the preferred tool anyway. But this is like a rotary tool that I've attached a Dremel bit to, a cup brush, and I'm going to use that to go inside. All right, so I got all clean. None of that crusty residue in the center is left. It's all nice and shiny and clean. The same thing. It's a little hard to see internally, but I cleaned it up with the Dremel really good. So all it takes is you might want to put a little bit of grease on here all the way around, but what you do is you hook it in, boom, like that, and then you put it back together with you line up your two holes for your screws. You want to make sure the shorter stem is on the bottom, and then we're going to push it on and tighten the bolts down, and it'll be good to go. And it might not be a perfect fix. Might get you a year or two until you can get a different vehicle, or whatever your case may be. All right, so there we go. We got it back together. Tighten that nut down on there, and tighten these two screws back up. All right, I wanted to do a little quick video of what it looks like inside where the starter mounts before I put the starter back in. So you see the teeth. The teeth, that's your flywheel. That's where the gears from the starter will engage, and that's they look I don't know, fairly clean. There's a little angle on them, and that could be from the starter engaging all these years, but the angle's pretty consistent on all of them, so that may be the way it was designed. I've seen some flywheels that are torn up pretty bad, but that flywheel looks good to me. So you can see where the bolts are for the starter. One's here and one's here. And then there's an alignment pin that goes here. So, all right guys, just reverse install. I don't have the bolt specs on the cables. You might have to look online for that, for tightening all the bolts back up. But I've been doing weekend mechanic work for 30 years, and I can't recall a time that tightening something tight has come loose on me. So I'm sure there's torque specs for everything online. You might want to check it out. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video made this a simple process for you.